Hello, this is Grandma Lorie with the story Israel Gets a King. In our last story, I told you how the Philistines stole God's Ark of the Covenant in battle and how it brought plagues of boils on every city that tried to keep it. So the Philistines sent it back to Israel. But where would Israel keep it? They did not have a temple yet. So they sent it to the home of a priest, Eleazar, who took care of it for the next 20 years. During all those years, the Philistines kept attacking Israel, stealing all their crops and animals, and making Israelites be slaves to them. But Israel now had a new high priest. He was the grown man who had been the boy prophet who heard the voice of the Lord. So, when the Israelites got furious enough at the Philistines, they complained to the high priest named Samuel. Samuel told the people in strong words, "How do you expect the Lord to help and save you when all of you pray to idols and false gods instead of your heavenly Father? I know you have little idols of Ashtoreth and Baal in your homes. If you really want the Lord's help in getting rid of the Philistines, you must immediately throw away your idols and pray to the true God in heaven. I promise that God will rescue you if you do what I say." Well, the people were desperate enough that they finally obeyed Samuel. They destroyed their little idols and prayed only to the God of heaven. When Samuel saw them obey, he said, "Come to the city of Mizpah, all of you, and I will pray to the Lord for you to defeat the Philistines." So all the Israelites came with joy and had a great ceremony of worship to the true God. They all fasted for a whole day as a sign of sorrow for their sins. They told Samuel that they would obey him as their chief judge and priest. But in Philistia, their enemies heard about the great gathering of Israelites. Their leader said, "Aha! They are gathered together. This is a perfect time for our armies to go against them and kill them. We will show them forever that they cannot escape us. We will keep on taking their harvests and animals, and they can't do anything about it. They will always be our slaves." When Israel heard that the huge army of Philistines was marching toward them, they cried out to Samuel, "Oh, Samuel, beg the God of heaven to save us. We have been faithful and fasted and prayed. Don't let them kill us." Samuel immediately offered up a lamb as sacrifice to the Lord and begged, "Lord, your people have obeyed you. We plead that you will stop the Philistines from attacking." Immediately, the Lord sent out a shout at the Philistines, a mighty roar, louder than thunder. It shook the ground and almost deafened everyone. It scared the Philistines so badly, they started to run in any direction to get away from the sound, but they couldn't. It wouldn't stop. Now the Israelites knew that the overwhelming roar was the Lord answering their prayers, so they were not scared, but they pulled out their weapons and chased after the Philistines all the way back to their own land and killed many along the way. The Philistines hid in their walled cities and barred the city gates to hold the Israelites out. They did not dare come back and fight the people who had a God with such a powerful voice it could shake the ground. Samuel placed a huge stone on the ground where Israel had won the battle. He said, "I name this stone Ebenezer, which means the stone of God's help. I decree that everyone in Israel shall remember this stone and how only obedience to God saved them." After that, the Philistines never dared come back to fight Israel for as long as Samuel lived. Well, that was wonderful, and you would think Israel would be satisfied. But the people found something more to complain about. As usual, they said, "Every other country has a king to lead the people in battle against their enemies. A king knows what to do, and he could lead us. Why can't we have a king like other countries?" They were still afraid the Philistines would come back to battle again. Indeed, many leaders in Israel came to Samuel to beg him to give them a king. Samuel said, "But God is your king. Didn't he prove it at the stone of Ebenezer?" But the leaders argued, "Samuel, you are growing old. Your sons do not keep the commandments like you do, so we cannot depend on them in the future. So we must have a king, a good king to rule over us, to demand justice and lead us in battle." They nagged and nagged until Samuel was deeply troubled and went to the Lord for directions. He was startled when the Lord said, "Let them have a king, Samuel. They are not rejecting you, they are rejecting me. Ever since I brought them from Egypt, they have turned away from me to follow false gods and worship idols. They don't want me to be their king any longer. But warn them of the bad things a king will do to them, so they can never say they were not told." In obedience to the Lord, Samuel gathered the tribal leaders and gave them warnings about a king. "This is what the Lord said to me. If you have a king, he will take your sons to be his guards and his servants. He will lead them into battles that they may not win." Samuel turned and looked at another part of the crowd. "He will force them to plow and harvest his fields like slaves. They will be ordered to make weapons and chariots without being paid." Samuel looked around again. "A king will take your daughters and make them cook and bake for him, and make him perfumes." Samuel told them even more. "He will take away your best fields and vineyards for himself and his friends, not for you, the owners. He will take 1/10 of all you own to build palaces and fine homes for himself and his friends. He will take your young people and your animals for his own personal gain." Samuel turned to sweep a glance over the people. Were they paying attention? "Yes, a king will do all of this and more, and you will not be able to stop him. That's what kings do, and you will shed bitter tears that you ever let him. But the Lord will not help you then. It will be all your fault if you demand a king. If a good king could remain good, he would be a blessing. But all kings prove that the more they get power, the more selfish and unjust they become." Samuel paused and looked sternly at the people. "So, are you certain you want a king who will surely do all these bad things to you?" They cried out, "Yes, yes, we want a king!" Samuel was astonished. Had they not heard a word he said about the bad things a king would do? Were they deaf and blind and stupid? The people continued to cry out, "We want to be like other nations, with a king to govern us and lead us in battle." Samuel shook his head in sorrow. Then he went alone and told the Lord what the people had said, that they would not listen to good sense. The Lord replied, "Then let them have a king, Samuel. I will lead you to the man who will be a good king when he starts out. But I warn you and these people that as he gains power, he will turn to wickedness." While all this was going on, the Lord already knew the man he would choose as king. You see, there was a rich man named Kish who had several large, good-looking sons. One of the younger sons, named Saul, was the most handsome man in Israel. He was also a full head taller than almost anybody else, maybe 6'6". One day, when the donkeys of Kish wandered away, Kish sent his son Saul and one servant to go find them. They looked and looked everywhere for days and finally gave up. Then the servant said, "Saul, we're close to a place where a prophet lives. Maybe the prophet can tell us where the donkeys are. We have no gifts or food to give him, but I have one small coin. Maybe that will do." Saul and his servant walked up the hill to the city where the prophet lived. Well, the prophet who lived there was Samuel himself. On the very day before, the Lord had told Samuel, "Tomorrow a young man will come to you. He is the one I have chosen to save my people from the Philistines. When you meet him, you are to anoint him with oil to be the king my people demand." As Saul and the servant were walking up the hill toward evening, the prophet Samuel was walking down the same hill. The Lord whispered, "That is the man I have chosen to rule my people." Saul stopped Samuel and asked, "Can you tell me where the prophet lives?" Samuel answered, "I am the prophet you seek. Go up the hill, and we will eat supper together. Tomorrow I will tell you what you want to know." Samuel paused. "And, by the way, the donkeys that were lost have been found, and soon you will own all the wealth of Israel." Saul stopped dead, confused. All the wealth of Israel? He was just an ordinary guy from an ordinary family, maybe a little tall. He told Samuel, "You must have the wrong man, sir. I'm a nobody." Well, maybe a tall, handsome nobody, but Saul did not think he was anyone special that evening. That night they had a fine dinner. Saul was given the seat of honor and the best cuts of meat and the very best foods. Saul was more confused than ever. The next morning, Samuel took Saul to the edge of the city. There Samuel said, "Saul, send your servant on ahead so we can talk in private." When they were alone, Samuel said, "The Lord has a special message for you. It is this: you have been chosen by God to be the king of Israel. I am here to anoint you with holy oil to make you the official king." Saul must have been dumbfounded as Samuel poured the holy oil on Saul's head and gave him kingly blessings. And just so Saul would believe him, Samuel prophesied all the people Samuel would meet on his way back home. Everything happened exactly as Samuel said it would. And finally, Saul was filled with the Holy Ghost and spoke prophecies about his own reign as king. But as Saul traveled home and thought about suddenly being the king, he got very scared. What if he didn't want to be king? He didn't want people staring at him all the time or bowing to him. And what if he was a bad king? Saul's insides quivered as he had these thoughts. Many days later, Prophet Samuel called a great meeting of all Israel and gave them messages from the Lord. Samuel said, "The Lord has chosen a king for you, and he is from the tribe of Benjamin. Step forward, all you men of Benjamin." Benjamin was the smallest tribe of Israel, but when they all stepped forward at Samuel's command, nobody could see Saul. Everyone asked, "Where's Saul? Where did he go?" The Lord whispered to Samuel, and Samuel told the rest of the people, "He is hiding in the baggage train of his father." Samuel knew Saul was scared of this difficult new calling, but the people ran and pulled Saul out and brought him to Samuel. And there stood Saul, so handsome and way taller than anyone else in the crowd. He looked every inch a king, even dressed in farmer clothes. Samuel cried out, "This is the man the Lord has chosen as your king. There is not his equal in all of Israel." The people shouted and cheered. When they finally got quiet, Samuel told them all the rights and duties of a good king. He wrote the words in a book so Saul and every king in the future would remember what the Lord expects of a good king. All the people shouted, "Long live the king! Long live King Saul!" A group of fine young men gathered around Saul and soon became his best friends and assistants. They were all faithful to the Lord and would always stand beside Saul for the rest of his life. You can see that at this point, Saul was a humble, hard-working man, not proud and stuck up that he had been made the king. He wanted to be the best king that ever was. The Lord had blessed him with the brains and the strength and even the good looks of a wonderful king. And Saul did try to be a good king. Join me again for more of the story.